Hello and welcome to RANE's weekly live discussion. I'm Roger Baker, the Executive Director of the Stratfor Center for Applied Geopolitics here at RANE. I'm joined by Emily Hawthorne, a senior Middle East and North African analyst here at RANE. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the upcoming or very soon Turkish elections and the context of those. And I think to begin us off, Emily, I have in most of my career in geopolitics, of course, and in the bulk of that, Erdogan is a given. And today we're seeing that Erdogan may not be as much of a given as even he was perceived to be 6 months ago. What is it that's changing in Turkey or in the regional dynamics or in Turkish society that has suddenly made this sort of constant of Erdogan a question now rather than a certainty?
Yeah, he really does feel like one of those constants. And actually, half the Turkish population today is probably too young to remember any other leader of the country other than Erdogan. So, and that's one of the sort of remarkable things about him, but also one of the reasons why we might be seeing a change. And really, there are two big drivers that we have to consider that are leading to this moment where President Erdogan might not win the election this upcoming Sunday. The main one is the economy, and we've had two major financial crises over the last 5 years. Over the last 5 years is the duration of time that Turkey has been under an executive presidential system. When President Erdogan championed a constitutional referendum in 2017, saying with this presidential system moving from what was a very robust parliamentary system, moving more towards a system that put some more levers of power in the hands of the president, he promised that it would do good things for the economy, that it would stabilize the economy. And in fact, for many Turks, it has been the opposite. And so that is really the primary driver is Erdogan and his Justice and Development Party really vaulted to power in the early 2000s because they were promising something different on the economy after a really rough 1990s for Turkey. And they did champion a significant amount of economic growth, and they had a different model for things, sort of all resting on a social platform of conservative, traditional Muslim values that many Turks resonated with. Now, really, the sort of economic promises that the Justice and Development Party, the AKP, Erdogan's party, has promised ring a bit hollow. And a lot of Turks are really struggling with the cost of living crisis. So that's primary reason number one. Another reason is the opposition in Turkey, which is varied, which is diverse. They don't agree on just about anything, except many of them think that it is time for Turkey to have a change of the guard at the head of the system. They think that the executive presidential system was a mistake. They want to return to the parliamentary system. So you've seen a lot of opposition parties put aside differences, focused on let's bring someone else into power that can help us sort of revert Turkey back to something that has more checks and balances, more rule of law, etc. And that sort of promise is vague. We don't know operationally or tactically how they're going to actually get there, but I think it resonates with a lot of Turks, especially with that young population that is curious about something different, something that doesn't look like Erdogan. So those are a couple of the main reasons why Erdogan might not win on Sunday, and also why his AKP might not perform as well in the parliamentary elections as they hope. And I did want to ask you, you have a lot of experience looking at governmental systems, including Turkey. In geopolitics, we talk about you don't want to focus too much on the individual at the head of a system, and you want to focus on some of the forces that are acting on the system. I was curious if you could expound on that and why that matters and why it doesn't matter when you're thinking about somebody like the president of a democratic country like Turkey changing. Like, why does that matter? Why does it not matter?
Well, I think there's two things that we want to look at there. One is what's the scope and scale that we're operating in? Are we looking at things over the 20-year time frame or the 30-year time frame, and in that global context? In those cases, the role of any given individual is diminished compared to the broader patterns that we're looking at. And the individuals often are reflections of the dynamics that they're in in that sense. And the narrower you get in geography, the narrower you get in time, the more the individuals matter, and it moves almost out of the realm of geopolitics and into the realm of basic politics and tracking and things like that. But I think there's another aspect that we've used a long time, and that is this concept of empathetic analysis. Basically, when we think about these individual leaders who seem to have long staying power and therefore a greater impact on the drive or direction of their country, Putin, Erdogan, the three Kims in North Korea, you can go on and look at these individuals. What is it that gives? What is it, and how do we look at them? Well, one thing I would say is we can look at them through these dual lenses of perceptive geopolitics and objective geopolitics. And nothing's truly objective, but we'll use the word anyway. Um, Objective geopolitics helps us understand the frame and the context within which they exist and they operate, whether that is the mechanisms of government, whether that is the actions and direction and evolution of society, whether that's the economic forces, the structural forces, the geography that has long had an impact in history. And then there's perceptive geopolitics. And perceptive geopolitics is, how do they see those same dynamics? As an outside analyst, I'm seeing them in a particular shape, trying not to put myself into a discussion of good or bad, right or wrong, but they are doing that. They see them from a perception based on their experience, their background, their geographic upbringing, their historical patterns and things that they've dealt with and what they've done and what they've seen. And their actions are going to be based on their perceptions and not necessarily on objective geopolitics, whereas the impact is going to be based on objective geopolitics and not necessarily their subjective desires. And I think what this reinforces for us is the need to look at both of those. And what I'll do is throw this back to you now and say, let's say we have a change in leadership in Turkey. What changes in Turkish policy domestically and internationally, and what doesn't? And how do we see those two forces, the roles of the individuals and the roles of the broader context, impacting that future of Turkey?
Yeah. So if we have, of course, it's a general election, so there's presidential and parliamentary elections. So there's several different permutations of what could happen either after Sunday or after, if the presidential election goes to a second round in a few weeks. If we don't have a clear cut winner that gets the majority, 50% plus whatever, then it'll go to a runoff. But so we have, if the opposition wins the legislature and Erdogan wins the presidency, there's going to be a little bit more opposition influence in policy, but Erdogan is still going to be the president in an executive presidential system. So there's going to be a lot of continuity there. If you have an opposition candidate win the presidency, and really the only one still in the running is Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, who is again at the head of this nation alliance, this opposition alliance that brings together some strange bedfellows with the agreement of we need to oust Erdogan and chart a different course for Turkey. That a government led by this sort of opposition candidate would try to introduce more rule of law. They would try to inject more sort of freedom of the press. They'd begin talking with Turkey's Kurdish population in a more pragmatic way and try to probe the possibility of a peace agreement with the PKK militant group in Turkey's southeast. A big change would be economic policy. Again, I mentioned the economy and financial crises have been one of the big drivers that have contributed to the unpopularity of the AKP among many Turkish voters right now. And they have said, we will support all sorts of really populist measures to support Turks in the near term and sort of boost their spending power during this cost of living crisis. But they've also said that they're gonna be more open to foreign investment. They're going to be more friendly with institutions like the IMF. And that connects to some of the international dynamics that would change if we had a leader who was not Erdogan. And that's where, of course, us as Western observers are thinking about this in terms of Erdogan's close relationship with Putin, Erdogan's bombastic relationship with NATO. Turkey is a NATO country, but there's a lot of friction there between Turkey and other NATO countries. The opposition has said that they want to conduct foreign policy less in a bilateral way between the president and other leaders. And I think that is a dig at Erdogan and Putin's relationship in particular. They want to conduct foreign policy via the diplomats, via the foreign ministry, via the bureaucracy, take it down a notch, make it more professional, remove some risk from allowing the president to conduct a lot of foreign policy. They want to be more professional in their interactions with the Europeans. They want to nurture that relationship with NATO. So it's one of these great examples of how the external forces acting on Turkey and some of the national security imperatives that Turkey has are largely not going to change. But the manner in which an opposition president would lead the country would feel different. It would feel more like they're trying to sort of balance sort of Western interests and Turkish interests and Russian interests and Chinese interests in a more conciliatory way in the near term. But ultimately, they'd be dealing with the same problems that an Erdogan-led Turkey is dealing with as well.
Right. So, I mean, if we look at it, Turkey remains the bridge between Europe and Asia geographically. It remains the controlling the mouth of the Black Sea, which is always going to put it at odds with the Russians or in cooperation with the Russians. It sits at that crossroad of east and west, of north and south. Its geography doesn't change. Its place in the system doesn't change. And therefore, what we would say is perhaps the strategic imperatives and the pressures on Turkey remain the same, but the choice of policy in how to deal with those imperatives may alter based on this shift in leadership. And sometimes that alteration will be effective for Turkey, and sometimes that alteration may prove more challenging for the country as well. Real quick, in 30 seconds, how do companies anticipate what to do about this uncertainty that we seem to be seeing?
Yeah, so if Erdogan wins outright on Sunday or in the runoff, there's going to be a degree of policy continuity, including with respect to the economy. He has promised to bring in a bit more of an orthodox economic team to try and sate Turks' concerns about the economy, but we don't think that economic policy is going to change very much. And that means that there's still going to be a lot of risk, and a risk of just continued debt crises, liquidity crises in Turkey, because Erdogan has a bit of an unorthodox view on things like interest rates that have contributed to some of the volatility in Turkey. If the opposition comes in, there will be some degree of expectation in the markets that there will be a bit more orthodoxy in the system, a bit more stability in Turkish markets. But I don't think that that will be in the near term. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty, unpredictability in the beginning as people try to figure out, okay, what is an opposition president, what's a non-Erdogan president actually capable of doing within the Turkish system. So there will be a lot of uncertainty in the beginning, and maybe more stability, medium, longer term.
So interestingly, that meeting expectations of Erdogan leads to stability of policy, but potential instability of economy. And on the other side, we reverse that, and so we get this
Yep,
odd
I
bit.
think so.
All right. Well, there's a lot more to look at on this, Emily, and I know we could go on for probably another 6 hours, but probably we have to close. So thank you. And for everyone watching, if you're interested in more from RANE, go to ranenetwork.com to learn about our geopolitical intelligence solutions. And thank you for watching. Our analysts go live every Friday on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Join us this time next week. Thanks and bye.